that democracies are not always that attractive for dealing with crises, of Frank's argument in The End of History. And this is the international relations strand that said that once democratization took place, we would end up in a world that was very peaceful. First of all, for that to work, you need almost every state in the system to be democratic. Because if you have a handful of democratic versus non-democratic dyads, as we say in international relations speak, then you're going to have trouble, because the basic logic of the argument doesn't apply when you have democracies versus non-democracies. The argument works when it's democracies or liberal democracies versus liberal democracies. I think if you look at what's happened over the past 25 years, it's a tall order to expect that this planet is going to be almost exclusively dominated by liberal democracies, or even largely dominated by liberal democracies. Now, one might counter that this is not a big problem, right? Because even when you have dyads that involve democracies versus non-democracies, you won't have a whole heck of a lot of war, because democracies are actually quite peace-like. This gets to my second point. Liberal democracies are very often warlike. Just look at the United States of America, the paradigmatic liberal democracy. We have been at war for 2 out of every 3 years since the Cold War ended. We have just now started our 7th war. I think it's fair to say that the United States is addicted to war. We love war, and we are a liberal democracy. And by the way, do you know what country has gone off on every one of these escapades with us? Great Britain, that other great liberal democracy. So if you're in a world where you have non-democracies, and a reasonable number of them, and the United States and Britain and other liberal democracies are roaming around the earth, I think you're going to get quite a few wars. And I'm actually, as a realist, in the very unusual position that I find myself opposed to almost every one of these wars we fight, and it's all my liberal friends. And this does not include Frank, who, by the way, Frank was opposed to the Iraq War. I just want to set the record straight on that. He opposed the Iraq War, much to his credit. But most of my liberal friends have never seen a war they didn't like. It's the realists who oppose all these wars. So anyway, the point I'm making is, if you don't get a planet filled with liberal democracies, you're going to have a lot of trouble. My final point is that I think Frank's core argument is, in essence, at odds with my understanding of liberalism. It's not ultimately a liberal argument in a critically important way. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, what exactly is he talking about? Liberalism in the beginning was built on the belief that individuals could not agree about first principles. They could not agree about the good life. And it was really a limits of reason argument. Liberalism is based on the assumption that human beings, using their critical faculties, cannot agree on first principles. And if you think about it, it really got going when Catholics and Protestants were killing each other in large numbers in England. How do you use your critical faculties to determine whether Catholicism is the correct religion, or Protestantism is the correct religion, or being an atheist is the correct way to go? How do you use your critical faculties to determine whether abortion is right or wrong? And liberalism was predicated on the assumption that people can't agree about these really important issues. And therefore, what you need is a powerful state to serve as a night watchman and an arbiter to keep these people from killing each other, but also to create this civil society in which they had the space to practice their own beliefs. So if I'm a Catholic and I want to go to Catholic church, and he's a Protestant and he wants to go to a Protestant church, he can do it. We can all lead our own life as we see fit. Now, if you look at Frank's argument in The End of History, there are no disagreements of any consequence. It's a remarkably harmonious world. That's why boredom is going to be the biggest problem. According to liberalism, as I understand it, Frank, you need a world state to serve as a night watchman or an ultimate arbiter, because people cannot use their critical faculties to reach agreement on lots of big issues that they care about. But in your story, by definition, they have to be able to reach agreement because they're liberal democracies. My bottom line is that this perspective is inconsistent with liberalism as I understand it, and more generally, it's inconsistent with human nature because it assumes that we can use our critical faculties, our reasoning capabilities, to reach general agreement on first principles. I think that has never been the case in the past. It's not going to be the case in the future, and therefore, we're never going to reach the end of history. Thank you.